29. The garage next door was dark. I crossed a gravel drive in a patch of sod and lawn. The road ran with small rivulets of water. It gurgled down a ditch on the far side. I had no hat. That must have fallen in the garage. Canino hadn't bothered to give it back to me. He hadn't thought I would need it anymore. I imagined him driving back jauntily through the rain alone, having left the gaunt and sulky Art and the probably stolen sedan in a safe place. She loved Eddie Mars and she was hiding to protect him, so he would find her there when he came back, calm beside the lights and the untasted drink, and me tied up on the Davenport. He would carry her stuff out to the car and go through the house carefully to make sure nothing incriminating was left. He would tell her to go out and wait. She wouldn't hear a shot. A blackjack is just as effective at short range. He would tell her he had left me tied up and I would get loose after a while. He would think she was that dumb. Nice, Mr. Canino. The raincoat was open in front and I couldn't button it, being handcuffed. The skirts flapped against my leg like the wings of a large and tired bird. I came to the highway. Cars went by in a wide swirl of water illuminated by headlights. The tearing noise of their tires dried swiftly. I found my convertible where I had left it, both tires fixed and mounted, so it could be driven away if necessary. They thought of everything. I got into it and leaned down sideways under the wheel and fumbled aside the flap of leather that covered the pocket. I got the other gun, stuffed it up under my coat and started back. The world was small, shut in, black. A private world for Canino and me. Halfway there, the headlights nearly caught me. They turned swiftly off the highway and I slid down the bank into the wet ditch and flopped there breathing water. The car hummed by without slowing. I lifted my head. I heard the rasp of its tires as it left the road and took the gravel of the driveway. The motor died. The lights died. A door slammed. I didn't hear the house door shut, but a fringe of light trickled through the clump of trees, as though a shade had been moved aside from a window, or the light had been put on in the hall. I came back to the soggy grass plot and sloshed across it. The car was between me and the house. The gun was down at my side. Pulled as far around as I could get it, without pulling my left arm out by the roots. The car was dark, empty, warm. Water gurgled pleasantly in the radiator. I peered in at the door. The keys hung on the dash. Canino was very sure of himself. I went around the car and walked carefully across the gravel to the window and listened. I couldn't hear any voices, any sound but the swift bong-bong of the raindrops hitting the metal elbows at the bottom of the rain gutters. I kept on listening. No loud voices, everything quiet and refined. He would be purring at her and she would be telling him she had let me go and I had promised to let them get away. He wouldn't believe me, as I wouldn't believe him. So he wouldn't be in there long. He would be on his way and take her with him. All I had to do was wait for him to come out. I couldn't do it. I shifted the gun to my left hand and leaned down to scoop up a handful of gravel. I tossed it against the screen of the window. It was a feeble effort. Very little of it reached the glass above the screen, but the loose rattle of that little was like a dam bursting. I ran back to the car and got on the running board behind it. The house had already gone dark, that was all. I dropped quietly on the running board and waited. No soap. Canino was too cagey. I straightened up and got into the car backwards, fumbled around for the ignition key and turned it. I reached with my foot, but the starter button had to be on the dash. I found it at last, pulled it and the starter ground. The warm motor caught at once. It purred softly. contentedly. I got out of the car again and crouched down by the rear wheels. I was shivering now, but I knew Canino wouldn't like that last effort. He needed that car badly. A darkened window slid down inch by inch. Only some shifting of light on the glass showed it move. Flames spouted from it abruptly. The blended roar of 3 swift shots. Glass starred in the coupe. I yelled with agony. The yell went off into a wailing groan. The groan became a wet gurgle, choked with blood. I let the gurgle die sickeningly. One choked gasp. It was nice work. I liked it. Canino liked it very much. I heard him laugh. It was a large, booming laugh, not at all like the purr of his speaking voice. Then silence for a little while, except for the rain and the quietly throbbing motor of the car. Then the house door crawled open. A deeper blackness in the black night. A figure shone in it cautiously, something white around the neck. It was her collar. She came out on the porch stiffly, a wooden woman. I caught the pale shine of her silver wig. Canino came crouched methodically behind her. It was so deadly, it was almost funny. She came down the steps. Now I could see the white stiffness of her face. She started towards the car, a bulwark of defense from Canino, in case I could still spit in his eye. Her voice spoke through the lisp of the rain, saying slowly without any tone, "I can't see a thing, Lash. The windows are misted." He grunted something and the girl's body jerked hard, as though he had jammed a gun into her back. She came on again and drew near the lightless car. I could see him behind her now. His hat, a side of his face, the bulk of his shoulder. The girl stopped rigid and screamed. A beautiful, thin, tearing scream that rocked me like a left hook. "I can see him," she screamed. "Through the window, behind the wheel, Lash." He fell forward like a bucket of lead. He knocked her roughly to one side and jumped forward, throwing his hand up. 3 more spurts of flame cut the darkness, more glass scarred. One bullet went on through and smacked into a tree on my side. A ricochet whined off into the distance, but the motor went quietly on. He was low down, crouched against the gloom. His face a grayness without form that seemed to come back slowly after the glare of the shots. If it was a revolver he had, it might be empty. It might not. He had fired 6 times, but he might have reloaded inside the house. I hoped he had. I didn't want him with an empty gun, but it might be an automatic. I said, "Finished?" He whirled at me. Perhaps it would have been nice to allow him another shot or two, just like a gentleman of the old school. But his gun was still up and I couldn't wait any longer. Not long enough to be a gentleman of the old school. I shot him 4 times, the Colt straining against my ribs. The gun jumped out of his hand as if he had been kicked. He reached both his hands for his stomach. I could hear them smack hard against his body. He fell like that, straight forward, holding himself together with his broad hands. He fell face down in the wet gravel, and after that, there wasn't a sound from him. Silverwig didn't make a sound either. She stood rigid with the rain swirling at her. I walked around Canino and kicked his gun without any purpose. Then I walked after it and bent over sideways and picked it up. That put me close beside her. She spoke moodily, as if she was talking to herself. I wasn't afraid you'd come back. I said, "We had a date. I told you it was all arranged." I began to laugh like a loon. Then she was bending down over him, touching him, and after a little while she stood up with a small key on a thin chain. She said bitterly, "Did you have to kill him? I stopped laughing as suddenly as I had started. She went behind me and unlocked the handcuffs. Yes, she said softly. I suppose you did.